and welcome to Sober Mama, the podcast dedicated to supporting women in the quest to ditch the booze. Join your host, sober coach and soon-to-be published author, Rach, as she talks all things alcohol and recovery. From real-life experiences to actionable advice on how to truly live your best sober life. Tune in to hear all about Rach's upcoming book, Sober Mama, and information on how to join her 90-day freedom program. Now, let's dive into today's episode.
Hello and welcome to Sober Mama, the podcast. Finally, I'm Rachel Shepherd. I am a sober coach in the UK. I coach mums to get sober, and I've recently written a book called Sober Mama, which is out for pre-sale now. You can find details of it on my website, and it will be released on the 28th of December 2024. So if you go on to sobermama.co.uk, you can find access to my blogs and social media handles, etc. So this podcast has taken me about a year to get to because I am terrified of technology. I've done about 50,000 takes of this podcast, and I just got one which I thought I'd nailed, and I've realised that the microphone isn't switched on. So I've had to start all over again. So I'm hoping this will be the last one. What I've decided to do is basically do 10-minute burst podcasts, because when I first quit drinking, I found Quit Lit super helpful, but I would get through loads of it. And I would find myself reading an entire book in a sitting and then get to the end of it and think that was really helpful, but actually I don't remember any of it. Whereas when I listened to podcasts, it was just so much easier to retain that information and get those kind of like important messages. So yeah, hopefully that's what this will do. So the first podcast topic that I want to cover is, am I an alcoholic? Because essentially this is the question I asked myself for the best part of 25 years. And if you've ever found yourself Googling, am I an alcoholic? Do I drink too much? Do I need to quit? Any variation of that basically, then the answer is actually really simple, because it doesn't matter whether you're a alcoholic or not. It's a really difficult thing to define. There's not like this exact science where you get to the point of no return. But if you're asking yourself that question, it's because alcohol is causing you some problems in your life. And the only real way to work out how much it's causing problems is to remove it and see what life looks like in comparison. So quite often people will decide they're going to take a break from drinking. Dry January is a really good example. It's a terrible idea. Not terrible in terms of like, it's obviously going to have a benefit for your health. But if you're looking to see what life is like sober, Dry January will not help you. And the reason for that is that your body takes about 3 months to recover from drinking. And in particular, the one thing that makes people go back to drinking after Dry January is that after a month off alcohol, you're going to feel flat, bored, possibly depressed. And it's because when you drink, your brain produces a rewards chemical called dopamine. And when you're drinking regularly, your brain decides it's not going to produce it on its own anymore because it knows it's going to get it from alcohol. That's why we crave it. Your brain's hunting for that kind of reward hormone. So when you quit for a month, after about 4 or 5 weeks, your dopamine still hasn't learned how to produce again. So you basically end up feeling hugely flat and bored. And quite often people attribute that to sobriety is really boring. And it really is just a lack of happy hormones. Now they start to bounce back around days 70 to 90. So if you can get to the end of 3 months, that's when you can really start seeing the impact of not having alcohol in your life. And for me, when I first quit, I absolutely 100% believed that my life was going to be no different, really. I just thought I had to put down a glass, and then my health would suddenly improve, and there wouldn't really be any other changes other than, I wouldn't be going on nights out to hit bars quite the same anymore. I didn't expect it to have such a big impact on every single area of my life. And, you know, if you're Googling, am I an alcoholic? Then you've got some problems going on, and trying to work out how much of that is attributed to life and stresses and how much is attributable to alcohol. It's impossible to prize those apart. So just as one example, withdrawal feels exactly the same as anxiety. So you might be thinking to yourself, oh, I'm an insanely anxious person. How am I going to cope without alcohol? But actually, when you quit drinking, you realize that a lot of that anxiety wasn't real anxiety at all. It was withdrawal. Because if you're drinking more than once every 10 days, you are effectively in constant withdrawal, because it takes about 10 days for your body to rid of all the alcohol. So if you really want to see what life could look like sober, you need to give it a solid period. And the good thing about doing 3 months is, firstly, you do at the end of it realize how great it is to be sober, but it's also, it's not frightening to do 3 months. You know, if I said to you, you've Googled, am I an alcoholic? You need to quit for good now permanently, because you clearly are, and life's going to be dreadful for you. It's so overwhelming to people, to the thought of forever. But you don't need to commit to forever. You just need to commit to 3 months. See if life does look better after it. And if you don't think it does, you know, crack on, go back to drinking. If you feel like life's better with it, it's your prerogative, right? But the only real way of knowing how much alcohol is taking from you is to see what life is like without it. And you can't do that in a very short-term space of time, because your body is going through so much of a transition. I will do another podcast on what happens when you quit and go through all of the different changes, because there is a huge amount of them. But if today or some point this week or some point even in your lifetime you've Googled, am I an alcoholic? Just think to yourself, what is alcohol taking from me? And is it worth having time out to see what life would be without it? Because I have never met somebody that has got to the end of a 90-day period and not seen massive improvements in their mental health, physical health, like absolutely every sense. So it's just worth giving it a go. You're not going to lose anything at all. And there's only things to gain, really. There's no real downside to giving up for 3 months. And like I said, it's then not overwhelming. It doesn't have to be this, you know, lifelong commitment, I can never have wine again sort of mentality. It's just an experiment, basically. So that's me for today. And next time, I think I'll talk about how to combat cravings, because they can be quite nasty, and in the early days it can be really tough. So I'll give you some tips next time on how to combat those. Thank you so much for listening, and hopefully see you on the next one.